Peter to Peter. Welcome to the Petey Performance Podcast. Great to have you on. You're on a week off. You're back in Ireland at the moment. So what's on the agenda since you got back?
Cheers for having me on. Now back in Ireland now for the week. So yeah, just catching up with a few friends, seeing my girlfriend who's back here as well. So and then just trying to get a bit of rest, but also keep the self ticking over as well. So it's been nice. Been nice to just chill out a bit. So yeah.
How does the coffee compare?
It's tough because my parents have a shitty machine compared to mine, so I'm trying to make do with that, but it's not great. But to be fair to my missus, actually her mum has a pretty decent machine, so trying to spend as much time up there so to keep the addiction going. But no, it's good. It's grand.
What way do you take your coffee, actually? Now that I'm here asking you.
I'm normally a big flat white man. Sometimes if I'm off to the gym early, I might just have an espresso. But yeah, normally a flat white, I'd say. Maybe a cortado as well if I'm getting real spicy. But yeah, normally flat white.
And how are the barista skills coming on? Are the lads in Rouen, are they tasking you with that in the changing room?
They're good. I really enjoy it. I'm literally fully addicted to it. So yeah, no, it's good. I was half thinking of maybe getting a machine and bringing it into the club and start charging boys, but haven't got around to it yet. But no, it is good fun. It's something to do away from rugby, and I enjoy it. And there's actually a cafe in Rouen that they sort of let us come in and sort of get behind the counter and get a bit of experience. So because it's potentially something that I think of doing maybe post rugby. So yeah, it's nice just to sort of have that and sort of be able to get a bit of hands-on experience. So
any more movement on those aspirations to move into business? Are you kind of just focused on the rugby at the moment?
It's slow burner, yeah. For the moment, it's rugby and just sort of seeing whether it is actually something that I would definitely want to do. So I'm very much keeping it on the slow burner, but because obviously the other thing as well is I don't know how long I'm going to be in France for, so I wouldn't want to be starting up a business in France and then being right, I'm leaving now, so I kind of need to get my life together and see where I'm going to be in a few years, and then I can start making some sort of concrete plans. But yeah, for the moment it's just kind of learning more about coffee and just sort of seeing what needs to be done from that sort of side of things, and then take from there. So.
But you do have another couple of years on the contract, including this year, and it seems like you're happy enough out and around. You're a bit of a superstar out there, winning the Player of the Season last year. So your rugby's going well, which probably gives you a chance to think about other things as well.
Yeah, it does. Yeah. I signed a 3-year last year, so I'm in the first year of that 3-year now. So and yeah, I'd like to think form wise I've been pretty decent. So hopefully can keep that going. So yeah, it does take the pressure off when you're performing on the pitch, and you can kind of get your head into some other stuff. And yeah, it's just easier when the rugby's taking care of itself. So yeah, no, I'm enjoying France. I like the lifestyle out there. I like that rugby is very much a big part of the culture, more so than Ireland and England. There's literally towns that we play in where it's just absolutely mental. It's like football clubs in England. You just have crazy fans and stuff. So yeah, no, it's good fun. But obviously, I don't know. Once I finish up, I don't think I'd want to live in France post rugby. I don't think. Obviously, I know you never know. That might change in a couple of years, but I think for the moment I'd want to either move back to Ireland or England. So yeah, but nah, for the moment I'm happy over there. It's good fun. So
yeah, so lots to think about. But the season obviously just started a month ago, and it's been decent enough, a decent start. You went 3 on the bounce, didn't you, winning? And then the last couple of weeks you've unfortunately been on the wrong side of tight losses. But how have you been? Have you been happy with your own performances so far? And is it what you expected at the start of the season? Or what are the aspirations this season for both you personally and for the group?
I think as a team, definitely the first 3 games were a big positive because we played obviously the team that had just come up from the division below, first game of the season away from home. And obviously, with the way the French are with home games, like they would have been targeting that, like you can't believe. So we managed to sort of meet fire with fire in that, and got a good win there. And then sort of the theme, like my first 2 years, the theme of our performances was we'd have one good win and then we'd lose the next week because boys would just sort of think we were superstars. So that was the thing, was to sort of back it up then the second week, and we managed to beat Colombier at home, and we'd never actually beaten them. So that was good to get that win, and then we had another home game. So then it was kind of this big thing of like, oh geez, if we could go 3 on the bounce here, we'd be top of the league and stuff. And boys managed to get the win in that as well. So, and then obviously the last 2 games they did a bit of rotating for Grenoble away, which kind of disrupted us a little bit. And I'm not sure whether it was the right thing to do, just to kind of, I think like we played 3 games, we're going into our 4th, like lads aren't that fatigued, like you're coming off a pre-season where you're pretty on it. So I don't think there was really that much need to rotate, but we made like 13 changes, and when you make that many changes to a team, it's hard to sort of keep the continuity. But having said that, like when we would have made those changes in the past, we would have gone away and lost by maybe 50 points, whereas we were in the game right till the end. We definitely should have got a losing bonus point. We potentially could have won the game. So I think we've definitely progressed from the years previously where you'd rotate the side and they just get absolutely hammered. So and then obviously our last game was at home, and that we just kind of, just the weather didn't really suit us. I think because we like to sort of spread the ball around quite a bit, and it was quite a wet day, and we just couldn't move them around. And even still, we still probably should have got the win, really. But yeah, like I think overall for the start of the season, it's pretty good. I think we're 5th at the moment, which is pretty good for us. So yeah, I think overall pretty happy with it. And then from a personal point of view, happy enough, never too happy. I'm always quite harsh on myself, which can be a bit annoying, but I think overall I think I'm happy enough with where I'm at, and yeah, hopefully can just keep it going then when we get back, and just make sure we keep taking over and getting the wins. So
it sounded like there you were trying to convince yourself back from the thought pattern that, oh, we should be doing better, but then just trying to tell yourself, look, we are actually doing well here, even though you have that want and that desire to, look, we could be going 5 from 5 here. But unfortunately, you're going to have those days where you just come out the wrong side of it. And it sounds like that was the weekend. And then it's interesting to hear from a player point of view to obviously performance staff point of view. You're saying we didn't need to rotate. There was no need. But I'm just looking at the fixtures, like, and how attritional the season is. And I know myself that the coaching staff were probably thinking ahead rather than thinking immediately. So they're probably thinking long term, because it's a long old season. Like, how many months of the year would you be playing, and how many games would you play in a season? And I know that you've said yourself it's extremely physical out there too.
Yeah, well, like it's a 30-game season, and that's if you don't make the playoffs. If you make the playoffs, then you're talking potentially 34 games. And yeah, like it is, like there's some big old boys in this league. Like we were playing against the winger the other day. It was like 6'5" and like 116 kilos. So, so yeah, there's some big lads. There's some big legs kicking about. So yeah, like it is a very attritional league. But I just think that, like, obviously I'm not a performance coach or whatever, so I don't look too much into that. But I just think that, like, this early in the season to make that many changes, I just think more bad than good. Like, I think
I completely understand where you're coming from, but I also understand where they're coming from, is what I'm saying. And if you had got over the line as well, then it'd be a completely different perspective.
Yeah, 100%. And I think as well, obviously you've got to factor in that, like, lads who aren't playing, it obviously gives them a shot. And if you do the first block and there's lads who haven't played a single minute, obviously I can appreciate that lads are going to get a bit pissy. But I don't know. I just felt like it was a missed opportunity, because I think if we had played with what's sort of conceivably our best team, I think we would have probably won the away game.
And the away games are huge, as you've just said there. Like,
a win away from home, it's massive over there. Like, it's almost like a double win. Like, So yeah, it was just a shame with that. But I think if I step back and look at the sort of bigger
Yeah.
picture, I can't see why they did it. So it's kind of like, yeah, fair enough. So
Isn't it Raj that says like the hardest aspect of coaching is keeping those lads that are on the periphery happy, because if
yeah,
they're not happy, then like it can permeate the group then, and it can get a little bit contagious.
yeah,
So that is the hardest part, and they want to feature, and they want to feel as though they have an opportunity
mm,
to get into the team, and they want to feel as though they're at least being able to contribute a little bit or as much as they possibly can. And that's the hardest piece of it. But it's interesting from hearing you speak about the French league there, and obviously how some games in your head are more important than others, especially like you have to win your home games. Do you find that mental performance or getting yourself to the same mental space is something that may be missed sometimes over there, because there are so many different factors playing into each game? Like you might have to travel on the bus for hours to get to these away
yeah.
games, so it's hard to get yourself in the same frame of mind for that game as it would be to say a game down the road where you're only going a half an hour and you're turning out at your own home field in front of your home fans.
Yeah, like it's funny you say that because yeah, like mentally, like it is poles apart. Like you play at home, and the sort of atmosphere in the changing room, like before the game, is just like deadly serious. You can hear a pin drop. Lads are just like have their headphones in, not much talking, like load of nervous energy. Whereas like away games, it's just completely different. Like lads are sort of chatting, having a laugh about what they did in the train yesterday, who won cards on the train up, or like different stuff. Like it's just completely different. And then like even the team talk, it's like, right, lads, first 10, first 15, like we need to come out of the blocks and like be on it and stuff to give us a chance to then be in the game. Whereas like when you play at home, it's just like we've got to go for 80 minutes. Whereas when it's away, it's like, right, let's try and do a bit for like 10, 15, see where we are. If the home team aren't quite on it, then we can kind of build into the game from there. But like it's not just the same home and away where like it's like, right, we're gonna give our 100% all. This is our game plan. We're going to stick to it. We're going to do X, Y, Z to get a win. It's very much kind of let's see how the home team are. If they're not quite on it, then we might be able to capitalize on it. But if not, then sure, look, we're away from home. We'll try stick in the fight. And sure, if we lose by 15-20, we lose by 15-20. So yeah, like when you first come over as a foreigner to France, like it takes ages to get your head around it. I think luckily now I'm so used to it that you can kind of get your head around it a bit more, and it doesn't frustrate you as much as it used to. But like I remember even this year, like we had a kind of like a culture meeting, talking about like our aspirations for the season and what kind of team we want to be viewed as and all this kind of stuff. And one of the French lads put up his hand and he's like, "Oh, like we need to be unbeaten at home." And I just kind of turned to one of the lads. I was like, "Why? Like, why is it all this like at home stuff?" And then somebody else put up their hand and was like, "Oh, we need to be a team that like that yeah are unbeaten at home and we give it a good shot away from home." And I just started getting pissed off. And I just put my hand. I was like, "Here, lads, like if you're literally openly accepting losing, then what's the point? Like, why are we here? Like, what's like we might as well just be like, right, sure, look, we're just gonna sack off all our away games. We'll just play 15 games at home, hopefully win them all, give ourselves 15 games to not get relegated. Like, why are we bothering going to the away games? Just leave them." Because like it's just that attitude of just like see what happens, like we'll give it a crack, but sure, like if we lose, it's not the end of the world. And then as well, by doing that, they then build the pressure up for home games so much that then when you do inevitably lose a home game, it's like the end of the world. It's like a funeral. Like people are going around not looking at each other. Like the president will come in and like bollock people out of it, and like there'll be no like aftermatch function. Like you'll be getting shitty food handed to you. Like just like even the dinner people won't look at you, and it's like we might have lost the game at home by 1 point, and we played unbelievably well, and we just lost to a really good side, and they'll treat it so badly like that. And it's just you just can't get your head around it. It's bizarre.
It sounds like it's very protect away from home. Like it's just like whatever will be. Like,
Yeah,
and then at home it's like completely outcome focused. Like it's very hard to focus on the performance because you're so focused, ultra focused on the score line. So then my question off the back of that is obviously you're having to deal with that within the squad and bring your own kind of perspective to it, which you've just touched on there in telling the lads, like, what is this about? Why are we having this? It's not acceptable. Do you have any strategies that you use yourself to kind of zone that out when you do go away from home to try and get yourself in the same frame of mind that you can perform as well as you do at home?
Yeah, like I think the way I've always kind of like prepared for games has been quite sort of closed off to the outside squad. Like I'd always just kind of be in my own little world, not too fussed about other people. I've tried to kind of, as I've got older, I've tried to be a bit more of like a leader and realizing that I need to kind of help out younger guys. And that's a conversation I've had with the coaches where they just kind of wanted me to be a bit more sort of like, because of the role I have in the team and that I'm getting older and lads are sort of looking up to me, that I need to sort of display that kind of like leadership roles and be like, right, lads, come on, this is what we're doing. We're getting ready for the game, blah, 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 blah. So I'm trying to be a bit more kind of open in that kind of way. But it is hard. Like it is tough for some away games where like lads are just sort of messing around and you can just tell they're not quite on it. But I think from my point of view, I can't like, if I go out on a pitch and I don't give it my all, when I finish the game, I just feel like a dickhead. Like I just feel like I'm a bit of a prick. Like I've just let down like the team, people who are watching, like my parents are watching at home, or like my girlfriend or whatever. Like I just feel like a bit of a fraud. Like, so you just kind of, I think that's the kind of driving force for me, is that like, if you finish a game and you know that you potentially didn't run as fast as you could when somebody was running back, or like you didn't get set, or you didn't see an opportunity because of not being quite there mentally, like that's the worst feeling in the world. Like it doesn't, like, you can accept if some big massive lad runs over the top of you, or like you've a kick to win it and you hit it well but it misses. Like that shit happens. Like that's not a kind of a mental prep thing, but just like in terms of effort, like you can never be getting questioned about your effort. If you're a professional athlete, you're getting paid to do it. Like that's just your bread and butter. Like you have to do it. You have to bring that to the table. And I think it's just very bizarre when you see lads just not getting up for a game because it's in a different part of the country. It's not in your stadium. And it's just like, what are you doing? So I think it is something that I've tried to kind of, like I said, be a bit more openly expressive of like how I prepare for games and how some of the other foreigners prepare for games. So I'll kind of speak to them and kind of be like, right, lads, let's really try and make sure that we're almost overly like expressive for this away game, because boys aren't at it. Like you can kind of tell, like after the warm up or whatever, you can kind of tell where lads are at. So like even an example this year, like we played Massey, who are the team that came up from the division below, first game of the season, and like first 20 minutes, like we blew them out the water. Like they were, no offense to them, they were pretty shit. Like they just weren't at the level. Like, and I think we were maybe 23 points to nil up after like 20 minutes. And then we've had like a lull before half time, giving them like 2 soft scores, got a yellow card. Then start the second half, we were like, right, just keep discipline. We end up getting 2 more yellow cards. We're down to like 12 players. And they've scored a couple more tries. And then the game for a little bit was like teetering, like a little, like I think we were maybe up by like 10 points, but like if they got the next score, they would have been well back in it. Luckily, we managed to get a bit of a jammy, like kind of intercept try, which kind of gave us a bit of breathing space. And we went on to win like 40-27 or something like that. And at the end of the game, like the boys are going mad, like celebrating, loving life and all this. I genuinely reckon I was probably one of the most pissed I'd been since I've been at the club, because I was like, we should have put about 80 points on these lads. We should have got a bonus point win, because we didn't get the bonus point. That was the thing. And like in the change room after, like they love taking like they call it the photo of the win in France, where like if you win away from home, you all take a big squad picture and they put it all over their social media being like, oh, we won away from home and all this shit. And like I genuinely didn't want to be in the photo. I like hid at the back. I was just like, this is embarrassing that lads are like jumping around the changing room. Like, fair enough, right, yeah, we got the win, fine, first game of the season. But like, for me, it was just about like, we need to change what's acceptable at this club, like what our standards are. Like, if we want to move forward as a club, we can't be happy with just getting a win. Like, we need to be like a performance-based team rather than an outcome. And they were just oh, we've got 4 points on the board. Whereas I'm looking at it going, we've just played the worst team in the league by an absolute mile. In their first game where they're not up to speed with the league, we've got to be smashing them and putting 60 points on them. And like lads just couldn't see that. They'd be like coming up to me like, Peter, what's wrong? Like, you okay? Like, what's going on? Like, and I'd be just like, don't speak to me. Like, I don't want to talk to you. Like, go away from me. Like, this is not acceptable. So yeah, that kind of stuff is quite frustrating. But yeah,
it sounds like that intrinsic motivation and you being very internally kind of motivated and able to push yourself and unaccepting of lack of effort or unaccepting of responsibility. You accept a lot of responsibility for your own performance and effort, and that comes very naturally to you. But you just touched on there that they're asking you to go into more of a leadership role. And it sounds like you have a lot of leadership qualities, but the one that you touched on that you've been working on there is being more openly accepting. So does that not come as naturally for you? And do you think some of that might come down to the fact that through your youth career, you played predominantly at out half where you just have to drive standards left, right, and centre?
Yeah, like I do think that is one thing that I'm not very good at, is like accepting that people potentially like don't operate the same way that I do. They don't think about the game the same way. They don't think about life. Like obviously everyone thinks differently, but yeah, I think like that is something that I've had to kind of try to get. I think I'm still in the process of doing it. I don't think I'm by any way there yet, but yeah, just in terms of realizing how different lads respond to different ways of speaking to them. Like different lads have different goals in their rugby career, what they want, different metrics of how they judge their own performance and stuff. But yeah, I think like in terms of the effort thing, I think like when I was at Ealing Trailfinders, and like the whole sort of mantra there was just that we would be the most hardworking team. And like I know a lot of teams do say that, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, we'll be the fittest in the league, we'll be the most hardworking, but like they actually put that into practice. Like all our games, like I've never been at a club where the GPS stats were used that much in terms of like team selection for like reviewing games. Like they'd literally break it down and be like, we might have been beating the team by 30 points, and we had a kick-off after 62 minutes, and they'll pull up our wingers' stats on how quickly they ran to chase the kickoff, and they'll be like, you were only at 82% of your top speed. Why weren't you above 90? Which was what we agreed at the start of the year, right? You have to be above 90% on every kickoff chase, and if you're not, why aren't you? Like you're basically cheating the team. So I think I have that system because I was there for 3 years. I think I have that system so drilled into my head that like there are certain times in a rugby game where your effort has, like, there's no excuse for your effort not to be maximal. Like obviously there are times maybe you've hit 2 rucks quickly and made a tackle, and then you're having to run back as like an escort, and yeah, you might be blowing out your arse. And in those situations I can be like, right, fair enough. But like there's times
I don't know. Like you can still give the maximum effort that you can give at that point.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah. But it might be, you might get overtaken by one of their lads who have. Yeah, that's of course. Like you'll give your max, yeah, but it just, your max might not be good enough. Whereas like from like set plays or stuff like that, like where you can run at this speed, I expect you to run at that speed. So yeah, so I think it's just that's drilled into my head that I just like, for me, that's just like a non-negotiable. And I think in France it can get quite frustrating sometimes because lads will just sort of conserve energy.
That sounds incredibly frustrating for sure. But it's not just in France. Like maybe it's more prominent and you're seeing more of it, but it does happen all over, and it's hard to kind of get that out of a culture once it's in there. But I get what you're saying as well about the communication and your delivery of how you're communicating with different people. And I think like a lot of that as well comes back to the fact that when you're playing 10, you have to be so direct on the field, and you're not thinking about, okay, how can I give the best picture of what I want here? You're thinking about how few words can I use here for him to know what I mean? And then sometimes that carries over to off the field and you start communicating with people that way as well. But if you think about it, you were taught and drilled to do that and speak that way and be that direct in communication for years and years and years. So it's going to be very, very hard to unlearn that.
Yeah,
And
definitely,
to
definitely.
give a little bit touch of more, I don't know what you'd even say, like a little bit more openness and acceptance to the way that you're communicating with people and waiting
Yeah,
for them to give their feedback back to you, being an active listener and then
yeah,
giving your perspective. That's got to be tough as well, especially when you're tasked with it and you're already at the start of the season. You're feeling yourself from you speaking there that we can be doing better here. We should be doing better.
yeah, yeah, 100%. Like, yeah, like it's just like you say, like it's just all about how you speak to people, and yeah, like it does. It can be challenging at times, and as well when you throw in like a foreign language into the mix as well, because like obviously
Mm.
my French is pretty good. Like I'm not gonna lie about it, but when you're having that kind of in-depth conversation with somebody, like it is quite hard to sometimes fully express what you're trying to say and get it across in the right way as well. So yeah, that just adds a bit more difficulty to it. So, but yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there.
You get there for sure. But it does sound like as well that you're at a stage of your career now that you're pretty confident in your abilities. And as we touched on earlier, you had a great season last season, picking up the Player of the Season award. And then obviously your performances that you've been stringing together have been fantastic. And that's why they're asking you to go into that leadership role this year and take a few of the younger lads under your wing. But from hearing you speak in the past, it seems that there have been peaks and troughs in your confidence through the years, but do you find with the experience that you've gained through your career now that you're able to keep that confidence at more of like an even keel and keep it more level and stable rather than having those peaks and troughs when you've had a bad game or even not thinking that you're the bee's knees when you play out your skin some days?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, like it is like probably one of the hardest things. Like where, yeah, like if you're kind of say like when you're younger, you kind of I don't know. I feel like there's a lot more going on when you're going into games in your head. Like you're thinking about this, that, and the other, and there can be a lot of distraction. Whereas I think when you get a little bit older and you've played more games, it's just a lot quieter in your head. You're kind of like, I've done this so many times. I've played X amount of games. Like nothing too crazy is going to happen in this game. Like I'll be fine. Like and it's just like knowing that. And then I think as well, the more games you play and the more mistakes you make or good things you do, you sort of realize that like you how you sort of if you make a mistake in a game, like it's not the end of the world. Like for you, you might think, Jesus, that's such a bad error, but like somebody watching the game isn't necessarily going to potentially even notice it. It might be that small, but for you, you think in your head, oh Jesus, like I'm after fucking up real big time there. But it's just being able to kind of be like, right, okay, I've made an error. What's my next action going to be? Whatever it is, just do that as best as you can. So whether it's just like an easy 2 meter pass off your left hand, just make it an easy 2 meter pass, and then you just build from there. And I think it's just not worrying like about mistakes. It's like they will happen no matter what. Like you'll always make mistakes. Like the biggest superstars on the planet, like make mistakes. So if you go into a game being like, oh geez, like what if I do this? What if I do that? It's like it's not benefiting you in any way because you're just going to start thinking about negative stuff. So it's like the acceptance of I will make mistakes in this game. That's gonna happen. Don't worry about it. Just comes into your head, chuck it out. Comes in your head, chuck it out. Move on to the next thing. And then the same on the flip side, you do something good. Like there would have been potentially games back in the day where I would have done something unreal. And for the next 5-10 minutes, I'm like, geez, that'd be class. I can't wait to like show the boys that in the video, or like can't wait to review that on a Monday morning. I'll be deadly. I'll think I'm the big man. And then 5 minutes go by and you've potentially like had your head in the clouds thinking about that. So I think in the same way as like negative things happen, if a real positive happens, you've got to be able to just be like, right, cool, yeah, I've kicked a 50-meter kick, or I've made a 60-meter line break, or I've thrown an unbelievable pass. Well done. Who gives a fuck? Like, move on to the next thing. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're only as good as your next action. So just get on with it. So I think it works both ways. It's just kind of like, I think just being very like in the present for the entire game, not thinking about previous things or thinking about what's going to happen. It's just like, I am where I am right now, and that's all I can control, and that's all you should think about, because everything else hasn't happened yet, or it has happened and it can't benefit you in any way. So yeah, I think that's kind of definitely come with just like experience and playing games. And I think it is definitely something that has sort of changed as I have got older, because I think that was probably one of my bigger criticisms, especially when I played in England, was that I would do some unbelievable things in games and then do some very average things in games. And also I would potentially string together 2 or 3 very good games, and then I'd have a string of maybe 2 or 3 games where I was either pretty average and not really noticeable, or fairly poor. And I think that was kind of the criticism. Whereas I think sort of since I've been back in France, I think I've managed to kind of always maintain a certain level that's acceptable, and then go above that, but never sort of dip below that. I think that's probably one of the biggest sort of things that I've noticed in my own game over the last probably 3 to 4 years. So yeah, it's just sort of something to keep tipping away on, and yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like it's something that you've definitely learned from over the years, and it sounds like you're in stark contrast to the mental perspective and the way you approach the game in your youth. So I kind of wanted to ask you then, what would be your advice to young 10s or 15s in relation to the way that they approach the game and the way they think about it? Because it sounds like, from what you just touched on there, and I was actually going to ask you straight away after, was it sounds like you're very present in games, and before games, if any of that worry does come up, you're well able to tell yourself, like, there's nothing going to happen here that I haven't experienced already and that I haven't dealt with, and I'm well able to deal with absolutely anything that is thrown at me here. So there's no reason that I can't go out and do it today.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny actually. I think another thing that's changed a lot since from when I was younger was I would use music before games quite a lot. Like, I'd just have headphones in and I'd just be off in my own little world. And I started doing quite a lot of sort of mindfulness stuff and like breathing stuff. And that's obviously all about sort of acknowledging where you are, like hearing sounds, smelling things, whatever it is. And I think from doing that, I actually stopped listening to music on the day of a game. So when I would be sitting in the changing room, I'd be sitting in the changing room and I'd just be taking everything in. So like just noticing things. So like studs on the floor, or like lads taping their ankles or taping their knees, or like the smell of like DP if lads were using DP, or like sticky spray or whatever it is, and then taking that onto the pitch as well. So like when you run onto the pitch, just being so aware of everything, like crowd noise, like what the pitch feels like the air, everything, like, and just taking it all in. I found that kind of helped me stay very like here and now. Whereas like before, in terms of music, I'd be sort of in my own head with the music, and I'd be thinking about like stuff I was going to do in the game, and like depending how the music was, if it was like quite upbeat, and I'd be like, oh, this is class, like feeling real good. And then even like on the pitch then as well, like you'd almost try and like deliberately block out the crowd, because you'd think you sort of needed to, especially like with me plies kicking.
Yeah.
Like when I was younger, I'd be kind of like, oh, the crowd are watching me, right? Just block it out, just go into my own technique. Whereas now I'm like the complete opposite. Now I'm like, there'd be times I'd be potentially kicking, and I can hear specific things people are saying, and I'm like registering that. And like, so me as a younger guy, I'd have heard that and been like, why are you letting that get in your head? Whereas now I'm just like, if I'm setting up for a kick and I hear somebody say like, oh, you're fucking 15's a lanky string of piss or whatever, I'm just sort of like, okay, you said that, cool, right. And now he's not talking, and now I'm still in this process of hitting a kick. Nothing has changed. Like it's just stuff that is happening. And I think just being aware of that, and it just has sort of kept me very like in the moment, and you're just accepting of everything that is in that moment, and then you're able to just go and perform. And I think that for me has helped me a lot. Whereas, like I said before, like where I was using music and trying to sort of block things out, it just made it worse.
It sounds like you have a great deal of trust now, or more trust in your process and in your skills, especially in place kicking, in that you know that even if these thoughts come, they're just going to go out, and I'm still able to kick this ball over the post because I've done it so many times before. And that is a big struggle for a lot of young athletes and young place kickers. And I loved what you said there around using music, because I often find that, especially with rugby players, if you're using music to get into a mental position, firstly, you probably should try and use the same type of music. But I don't really think it's that appropriate if you're in a decision making position, or a position where you have to be aware, because that's what you talked about, awareness.
Yeah.
Because obviously, if you look at states of arousal going into a game, if you were going to be playing in the back row, or you're a player that's just going to be running into lads and trying to smash lads, it's fine to be listening to the Gladiator soundtrack before you go out there, or listen to Roy Jones Jr. or Dr. Dre or any of these lads, because you want to feel like a badass, you want to be pumped up, and you want to be ready to go. But if you're in a 9, 10, 15 where you have to communicate, be very aware of your surroundings and able to pick up on every little thing so that you know how to react and communicate, it's not going to benefit you to be hyped up on caffeine gum and absolutely raring to go and smash lads, because sorry buddy, you're only 80 kilos, you're not going to smash anyone anyway. So play your own game. And that's something that a lot of youngsters don't realize, is I don't have to do the same thing that everybody else does. I can do what gets me in the right frame of mind to play the game. So it sounds like you have a decent routine there now, and you've touched on trusting your skills and backing yourself to execute. How important has developing your skills and doing extras outside of your team trainings over the years been to you in being able to now back yourself and trust your skills to deliver on game day?
Oh, massive, yeah. Like especially like in terms of the kicking side of things, like that's something that I've done literally since I was walking pretty much. Like it's always been my main sort of selling point. And like I'm at a stage now where like in terms of my technique and stuff, like it's so nailed I can literally do it with my eyes closed. Like so I think that's something that you've got to put the work in early. And I think like the way I am now is like obviously I'm going on 30 this year, and like my sessions during the week, like in terms of the actual place kicks that I do that are actually in a rugby scenario, in terms of like in locations that you potentially be hitting kicks like conversions or penalties, I mean per week I might be taking maybe 20 tops in a week, whereas before, like when I was a lot younger, I'd be probably in the hundreds easily. And I think it's just like now that my like I know what I'm doing, like my technique isn't changing. I know what way I need to be. So now it's just like little minor tweaks of like potentially if I missed a kick the week before, I'll look back at that and see what potentially had led up to that, like whether it was late in the game, I was a little bit fatigued, or whether it was early and I was a little bit too kind of like I hadn't quite got into the games, you know. So it's just sort of looking at little factors like that, and then a lot of the time I do very like not real game scenario kicks. So it'll be like maybe 5 meter, 10 meter kicks on like very tight angles with like no run into the ball, like just literally my standing leg and my kicking leg, just a swing. Because I picked up quite a lot of stuff from the NFL. I looked at a lot of some of the kicking coaches in the NFL, and I picked up some stuff from them. And yeah, I think it's just like, especially as you get older, like your body, you need to look after your body as well. So like obviously kicking stresses your groins and your hips out quite a lot. So again, it's just like sometimes after like our long day be our Tuesday, like by the end of a Tuesday session, you might be that broke up that you just can't kick properly. So it's then about being able to like figure out ways that you can still do a session for maybe 10-15 minutes and get something out of it, but it's not at full throttle. So I think that's quite a big thing. And then in terms of just general rugby stuff as well, like moving away from the kicking, like in terms of like decision making, passing, tackling, that kind of stuff. Again, like for me, I've always found like it needs to be short and sharp, especially like my defensive side, like rucking and tackling, which I've like tackling in particular, I feel has come on massively sort of the last 4 or 5 years. I'd say like when I was younger, that was quite a weak part of my game, whereas now I'd be quite comfortable with it. And I think that's come from just like sort of little 5 minute blocks where you're going at match pace, flat out. It might be into bags, but it's at that match speed. Whereas potentially before that, I'd be doing it at the end of the session, but it would be kind of at like 50% pace, and it's just not realistic. So like it's like stuff like that needs to be done at the speed you're doing it in a game, and especially as well like a fullback. I think that was one of the changes from moving from 10 to 15 was my passing skills. When you're passing at 15, you're doing a lot more passing at high velocity running, whereas at 10, it's at a lot lower velocity. So the pass is a lot easier. Whereas when you're coming onto the ball at 15 and potentially having to hit a winger flat, usually the stakes are a lot higher because it's usually the last pass and it's the pass is going to try and you're doing it at pretty much flat out pace. So again, it was like, at the end of sessions, rather than just standing 10 meters away from a lad static and just like doing these ones, it was like, no, I'm going to do 3 passes off my left, 3 passes on my right, but I'm going to do it after a 40-meter build up, and I'm going to receive a ball at probably about 80% top speed and then fizz a pass, and I've got 3 attempts and they have to be good. So I think it's that kind of like changing how you sort of training more intelligently, I think. And I think as well, there's one other thing as well, like if I choose, right, I'm going to do three reps on each hand or 3 reps on each foot, I will only do 3 reps on each hand or 3 reps on each foot, regardless of the outcome. Like if they're all shite, then they're all shite. That's something that then I have to deal with until the next time I go out on the pitch, and I can either think about it, I can stew about it, I can do whatever I want with it. But I think that's something that I've found mentally is quite good, is that like if you say, right, I'm going to do 5 kicks to finish training, I need to try and get 5 from 5, and you hit 0 from 5. A lot of lads will be like, right, I'll do another 5 and stay out again. Now I'll be like, no, right, I've hit 0 from 5, deal with it. And you come back the next day or you come back in 2 days' time and then you go again. And what you'll find is when you come back, you have that 0 from 5 in your head and you're like, right, I need to be spot on it today. And you won't hit 0 from 5. So I think it's just like those little things that come with experience of just how to train a bit more intelligently and just get the max out of yourself.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's very much quality over quantity, which is a mistake that lots of youngsters make in the quantity of execution, of skill execution. Because if you do 100, as you said, they're not going to actually be 100 at high intensity or 100 high quality reps because you're doing 100 of them. How are you going to be as focused on the 5th one as you are in the 95th one? Like, because they don't mean as much. And as well as that, when you go away from the pitch and then come back, it's a new day. Like it's a new frame of mind that you're in. You're in a new state of readiness with your physical body, like, and where your performance is there, like, and it allows you to be okay with failing a little bit. Because if you have that in your mind that I have to get 5 from 5 here and I'm not moving on until I do, you're gonna have a very negative perspective on failure. Whereas if you fail some days, then you know, well, at least I'm trying here. Because if I'm executing 5 from 5 every day, am I taking 5 hard kicks? Am I really challenging myself? Because if I'm kicking everything over the bar and I'm missing some in games, if I'm kicking them all over and converting in training and I'm missing some of the kicks in games, then there's something amiss there. You're either having kicks in training that are a lot easier, you're missing something in terms of your mental approach, Or simply put, you're not putting together what you've been practicing, or you're not putting together on game day because you're not practicing the same way as what will happen on game day in training, which is something you've touched on there. So do you think that is something that you missed as a young lad? Like you were like straight out of the book of Johnny Wilkinson.
Yeah.
I have to do more than absolutely everybody if I'm going to be better than everybody.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I think I was definitely more quantity focused. And part of me sometimes, I kind of sometimes think that you have to get in a certain amount of quantity because obviously you only do limited reps. You're not getting those kind of routines nailed. So I think potentially when you're younger, you need to. It's like a fine balance between the
To
two. It's
vary,
not.
you need to vary it. Like it's
Yeah,
variance.
yeah. So I think, yeah, like when I was younger, I think it was definitely like I'd be going out with a bag of balls and I'd be out there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and I'd be kicking. God, I don't even want to know how many kicks I'd be hitting, but yeah, it was very much like I have to hit this amount of kicks till I can go or whatever, and I'd be thinking about like that all the time. So yeah, I think like you gotta kind of find a fine balance between the two. I think once you then get older and you kind of get more experience, you then can train a bit more intelligently and you're doing slightly different things. But yeah, I think if I could go back, I'd probably make a few little tweaks and adjustments. But
Do you know the funny thing about that as well is when you're doing that when you're younger and you're going out for an hour and a half, 2 hours, like multiple times in a week. And especially when you're in that growth period of maybe the ages about 16 to 20 or so, and everybody else is doing the gym and getting bigger, and you're like, why am I not able to put on weight? Like it's like, here, mate, you're going out kicking for
yeah,
2 hours, four
yeah,
times a week. Like, will you relax the cacks? As well as probably, Asher, I'm at the pitch. I might as well do a little bit of fitness at the end to finish
yeah,
here. So your
yeah,
training volume is far higher than everybody else. So of course you're not going to be able to put on weight because when the props show up, they're literally showing up to train and going home and eating straight away afterwards, and they don't do anything else outside of that. Maybe gym if they're a bit of a gym junkie. But
yeah.
that's an interesting one for young athletes as well. So what would be your major pieces of advice for players at 10 and 15 that have aspirations of playing at the highest level? Or
Um,
even any players in general. I suppose in the back line is probably the most appropriate.
yeah. Um, I think probably in terms, I suppose if I speak from a 10 and 15 point of view, I think one of the biggest things I find is like communication, because as I almost feel like the 10 is the main communicator in attack, in that he is like deciding where you play, how you play, where you're going to attack, this kind of stuff. Obviously 15 can kind of have a bit of an influence on that, but not quite as much. Whereas the 15 is very much the defensive leader, because as a 15, you're almost like a goalkeeper in soccer, in that you're at the back, you can see everything in front of you, you can see how the other team is attacking, and it's, for me, like people might view a 15 and be like, oh sure, they're out the back, they're away from the front line, they're putting in any tackles and stuff, but you're almost like the general in terms of moving your troops where they need to go, because especially like if you're a 15 who's played quite a bit at 10, I sometimes find I can just pick out the opposition's 10, and I almost watch him. Obviously, you got to keep an eye on the ball as well. You got to keep an eye on nines who are picking around the fringes. But if you just watch their 10, you can often see where they're going to be attacking before they do. So then you can kind of speak to your front line and you can stop lads overfolding, or like you can potentially hold players back on the short side when you know they're going to bounce back and stuff. So I think in terms of for young lads, I think definitely the communication aspect when you're playing a 10 and 15 is just massive. And almost for 15, it's almost like doing like a running commentary during the game. Like I'll almost be talking to myself in the backfield, being like, right, 10's going this way, or 9 is still there, the blind wings hanging out the back, they might be going back to blind side. And I'll just kind of be talking that. And then anytime I see something major, that's when I start shouting. And so obviously other people can hear me. But yeah, I think definitely the communication side of things. And then I think as well is just like when you're younger, I think we kind of touched on it earlier, where like young lads sort of see somebody do something, or they watch like their idol do something, and they're like, right, that's what I have to do. And I think that can be a good thing, but it can also be a terrible thing, because that person you're getting inspiration off is not you. They don't think the same way as you. So you, by all means, try it, but you need to be able to try it and be like, this doesn't work for me. And you need to kind of get a very deep understanding of how you work as a person. And I think a lot of lads get caught up in trying to be like Johnny Sexton or Gary Ringrose or whoever. And they try and do that, and then it doesn't work for them, and then they get frustrated and they're like, why isn't this working? Like, fuck. And then it's just like it builds up and up and up, and then they just get lost. So I think it's like I think it's like trying to get as big a net of learning as you can from a wide range of sports, if you're talking like performance wise, and then just sort of try things in training, try like the way you go out to training, mental build up, whatever it is, like just try little bits and see what feels good and what doesn't. And then just as you get older, I think you'll kind of just fit into one way of doing things or one way of not doing things, and you'll kind of develop an understanding of yourself. I think that would probably be one of the biggest bits of advice, because I think that's something that I would have used a lot when I was younger. If I could have had that knowledge when I was younger, it would have helped me out a lot, and I probably would have got further at an earlier age. Because I think I was very much like Johnny Wilkinson was my idol, and I just basically tried to be like Johnny Wilkinson, even though that wasn't particularly healthy and it wasn't the best mindset at all.
It's not healthy at all, really, is it?
Yeah. So I think it's like, but then there are aspects of his have benefited me as well. So I think it's just being able to like nitpick little bits from different athletes or different organizations or whatever, and then being able to sort of build it together, and then you portray it as, this is me, this is what works for Peter Lydon. Whereas it's not good to be like, right, I have this from this person and this is what I am. And it's like, you need to come up with your own sort of spin on it and have your own like little niches and stuff. So I think that'd be the main thing is, communications, and just really understanding what makes you tick as a person and what gets you up for sport.
100%. And it's knowing what you're good at as well. And another like topic as well, or another way that we're touching on effort, like that I don't understand, and I'm sure it sounds like you're very similar, is communication is literally, it costs nothing and it's so beneficial to the team. And I know from a 15 perspective, you're just touching on there, like organizing the defense and chatting to people. It's even more important in today's game where there is the threat of a 50-22. And it's only when you play with a winger that's very vocal as well that you realize that, Jesus, this is actually so easy if we all just talk to each other a little bit more, like, and are effective in our communication as well, obviously. And then obviously the aspect of being you and do what makes you tick and do what you're good at. You touched on their transferable skills, and it's interesting because you were quite a promising footballer in the day as well. And I think a lot of young athletes miss out because they're of this opinion, because they're being told from all angles that you have to pick a sport now, you have to pick a sport now. So what do you think of early specialization? And do you think that you gain anything from playing football up to a certain level and then deciding that rugby was the route to go?
I think I think kids should try and play as much sport as they can, like, because if you take Ireland for example, if you're playing hurling, playing soccer, playing Gaelic, playing rugby, like, you're dealing with a smaller ball in hurling, you're dealing with aerial skills, like that kind of stuff. Like, you're only getting better. Like, it's making better all round sports person. So yeah, I definitely think that, like, play the most amount of sports as you can. Obviously it does get to a point where certain sports will conflict with each other, whether that's calendar wise or whether it's body composition wise, because I think that's kind of got to me, was that I got to sort of 15, 16, which is when I first started playing like SCT rugby, like in school. And I was being told by rugby coaches that I needed to put on size, but then my soccer coaches were like, "You're a left midfielder slash like sort of central attacking midfielder. We need you like pretty dynamic, agile, real quick." Like, and so that was kind of conflicting. So then it was then that I kind of needed to be like, right, like, which do I want to kind of pursue like full time, like, and put like all my eggs in that basket. And then once you do that, then you can still play your soccer, but you're not doing it to try and make a career out of it. So like I stayed playing soccer, but I was a very big central midfielder. Like while I was playing, I'd been quite physical and stuff like that. But
you were yourself though as well.
yeah, yeah. But yeah, I think like I definitely think it's important for kids to play as much sport as they can. Like I think the amount of like, because I think even for me, like I played a lot of hurling when I was younger, and I think that's helped me a lot, like with my aerial skills in rugby, just being able to like know where a ball is landing, stuff like that. Like you're used to catching a sliotar, which is way smaller. Like you just, it's only beneficial. So yeah, I think it's like definitely till you're about 15, 16, play multiple sports, and then sort of around that age, I think is when you're, if you want to go on and try and pursue it as a career, then you do that and you make that decision. But I think, yeah, like I think you have to put yourself out there and try as many different sports as you can. And I think from a rugby point of view, one thing that I wish I'd done is maybe done like a martial arts kind of sort of sport when I was younger, just because I think like grappling wise and stuff like that would have been very beneficial. But I think yeah, definitely.
We
Just
miss out on that in Ireland, really, like because there's
yeah,
no wrestling culture, or now
yeah.
there probably is going to be more kids doing jujitsu and whatnot, because MMA is becoming a big thing in the country. But I think we miss out on that aspect in comparison to in other countries, and
Yeah,
maybe it
definitely.
benefits us to an extent as well. But obviously, it's harder to get into the close quarters on a rugby field, and now when they're limiting the amount of minutes that you can do contact as well, it might be beneficial for younger athletes to go out and seek that in external sources,
Yeah,
because I've spoken about it with Andy Ryland on here, who's contact coach. Like there shouldn't be a limit on contact until they decide what constitutes high intensity contact and what constitutes extensive low intensity low risk contact, because if we're right beside each other and we're just grappling, as you just said there, then there's going to be low risk really, and there's going to be loads of benefit to doing that because you're going to get more comfortable in a load of different positions. But it sounds like from the whole conversation that we've had that you do have a very holistic approach to your own performance. And I know you've touched upon doing extras in terms of skills, but also extras in terms of build-ups and speed work. And then you've also spoken about how S&C was very important in putting on that weight early days, and it's still probably incredibly important for you. So do you do much extras yourself in terms of speed work to be able to hit those max velocities in games and continue to push the ceiling on it and get better and better and better? And then have you figured out as well, in terms of your own body and your approach to physical performance, what's the optimal amount to do in terms of not just speed, but S&C in general?
yeah. Like the way I've kind of done it now since being out in France is like on our, so we have like a speed day, like where we're doing like 30-second passages of play and then like minute rest of like 15v15. So on those kind of days are when you're going to hit your more higher speeds. So what I normally try and do is like at the end of that session, I'll speak to the GPS guy and just sort of get a view on how many high speed meters I've done. And then if I need to do a couple of like runs at the end, me and a couple of boys will just go down the end of the pitch and just do a few like build ups or whatever it is. So we normally just like, we have a new S&C coach this year who's actually very good. So he'll normally just come down and take us based on what our stats are from the GPS. And then yeah, it just gets you used to those high speed meters, because yeah, like I mean, as you know yourself, like speed, you need to be working on it the whole time. So yeah, I do a lot of that. And then in terms of gym stuff, recently I've actually been doing a lot of I suffered quite a lot from cramp in my career. And I actually played with a Kiwi guy last year. And he was sort of saying that he had the same thing, like sort of hamstrings and calves. And what he found was doing a lot of like strength, like specific strength work on your hamstrings and calves was helping him a lot with his cramp. So I've been doing that a lot, like a lot of iso holds, like stuff like that. And I found that's helped a lot. So I think when I was younger, my extras would have been very much about, oh, let's try to get bigger, let's do beach set, like bench and arms and stuff like that. Whereas I think now it's a lot more performance based and like doing stuff that's actually going to benefit me on a rugby pitch rather than benefit me walking down the beach on my summer holidays. So yeah, like at the moment it's very much a hamstring calf based stuff. And then just a lot of flexibility as well. I like to do a lot of stretching and stuff like that. Sort of found that last year as well when I played a lot of rugby last year, and sort of around February, March time, I just was like, my hips were just in an absolute ball. So just being like really trying to like nail like just every evening when you're watching TV or whatever, just to get down on the floor and just like do various different stretches and holds and stuff like that, and a bit of banded stuff. So it just keeps you ticking over.
100%.
So yeah, that's one of the main things.
It sounds like you're giving yourself the things that you're not getting from the team training sessions. And that's very important for young athletes as well. Like if your team sessions are absolutely battering you and they're getting you to the old school like Bronco runs and Malcolms and whatnot, then there's no point doing an additional fitness at that intensity. Like you need to probably get out and train at a little bit higher intensity. Doing it after that would not be appropriate. You should probably get it done beforehand, or train at a little bit lower intensity if you do feel like you need additional fitness. But probably at that age level for young athletes, you don't need additional fitness. You just need to start recovering a little bit better and managing your body a little bit better, eating well, going to bed on time, etc. But super chat, man. I think it's time to move on to our quick fire questions. So the first one is proudest achievement to date.
Proudest achievement to date. Jesus. I'd say probably just like sort of when I first broke into professional rugby, I'd say, because it was always something that I wanted to do. I'd always been like, in terms of with my parents and stuff, I'd always said that was what I wanted to do, and they were always very supportive of it. So I'd say probably the day that I kind of broke into full pro rugby, I was just kind of like, right, sort of not that I proved them wrong, but just kind of like, it's nice to be able to, like, since I was like probably 6 or 7, I was saying, I want to be a professional rugby player, and to be able to then turn around and be like, here I am, probably, I'd say probably that.
Yeah, fantastic. Next one is favorite athlete of all time.
He's just retired, Roger Federer.
Oh, really? That's interesting. You really are a multi-sport fan then.
Well, I think as I've got older, I've really appreciated like single athletes more, like rather than think those lads, like to have the mental ability to be able to just be them out there and do it week in, week out, year on year. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, I think when you're part of a team, the team can carry you sometimes. Whereas when it's you, like, you're literally on your own. And I think just like individual sports are just, I think they're just a step ahead. So yeah, I'd say Roger Federer, and just even just the way he is, like, as a bloke, like, he's just, there's no kind of like, he just doesn't seem like he's like a show off. He just is a tennis player, gets his shit done, and then goes home and lives like a normal bloke. So yeah,
absolute legend. What's the biggest thing that you've learned in the last 12 months?
Last 12 months. I'd say just mentally, because I played a hell of a lot of rugby in the last 12 months. And I think just mentally dealing with that. And as well, just like with stuff that happened last year at our club, with our 10 killing himself, I think just I think the mental side of that, and dealing with kind of the pressures of rugby when you're playing week in, week out, and not really able to get any rest because you have to play. Kind of, I'd say probably just doing a lot of mindfulness stuff and like relaxation stuff in the evening. I think that's probably kind of looking after my mental side a lot more.
And obviously there's more of a personal focus there on yourself, but has there been more conversations, open conversations amongst players and teammates and whatnot around mental health and how you guys are feeling and stuff? Has that been a focus point for you guys?
A little, I'd say a little bit. I wouldn't say massively. I'd say a little bit. I think it's probably made me more vocal with my friends, like not in rugby.
Yeah.
So I think like lads from back home, I think that's probably, it's probably opened up a lot more there. In terms of lads at rugby, a little bit, but again, it's quite like when you're playing in France, like there's quite a lot of cliques, and so it's everyone together. So I'd say a little bit with a couple of the foreign lads that I'd hang around with quite a bit over there. So like 2 or 3 other lads, but other than that, not massively. But yeah, I would have said like.
But within those groups, it probably is happening. Is the thing as well within those cliques.
Yeah, which is good.
So then, to move on to the final one, what would you tell your 18-year-old self?
I would say find your own way. Just don't be too worried about other people. Just focus on yourself and sort of gather as much knowledge as you can, and then mold it to who you are as a person and what makes you tick. And don't be kind of thinking, oh, I need to do this because this person does it, or this coach might like me more if I do this. Just very much just find out what works for you, mold it to how you are as a person, and then just put it into action, and don't worry too much about it.
Huge messages in there for loads of young athletes at any level in any sport. So Peter, thanks a million for coming on. Enjoy the rest of your time in Ireland and best of luck with the rest of the season. Hopefully you can get back to winning ways in the next weekend you're out.
Cheers, mate. Appreciate that.